I'm probably, I would say, more regimented than Winston. I mean, I'm up at 4:30 every day.
How do you know I'm not up at 4:30?
Well, but also, so Winston was giving you a hard time over coffee, right? You're more regimented, but Winston was here earlier, even though you stayed last night.
Yeah, he stayed at a hotel like 5 minutes away.
And he drove in this morning, and he beat you to coffee.
Sometimes it works in his favor to not have a plan, you know?
Or a better plan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer Smith here, host of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast, sponsored by Pareto Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSite. Enjoy today's episode.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and kick this podcast off. We're in a new studio. For those folks that are watching visually, we're in a backup studio, but it's not really a backup.
It's a nice backup.
It's a very nice backup, right? So I'm sitting here with Winston Elliott and Cliff Favors. You go by Cliff, right?
Yep,
not Cliff.
I do.
Okay. Who are both People Solutions?
People Solutions.
But consultants over at Lockton. Obviously, very smart guys. This is our first chance to meet, so I'm getting to know you as we're going to go through the podcast. But I'm really excited to dig into benefits and tell your story a little bit. So before we do all the kind of the technical stuff, Winston, why don't you kick us off? Who are you? And then I'll move over to Cliff, and we'll do the same.
So Winston Elliott. I'm from Houston. Grew up in Houston. Went out of state to Georgia for college, and went on an Army scholarship. So then I was in the Army for a little while after that. Lived all over the country. I tell people I got to spend my 20s jumping out of planes and blowing stuff up, and I really had a good time. But then
hurting your knees as well.
Yeah, hurting my knees as well. But then ended up getting out of the Army, starting a family in Houston, going to Rice for business school, which I really enjoyed. And we were kind of speaking about it earlier, but I went into strategy consulting immediately after Rice, and have kind of since, was at a previous employer and then now here at Lockton, moving into kind of the people space, partly because I saw, one, it was an interesting niche that I didn't feel like was totally being addressed, not just from a benefit standpoint, but just from what we call like people strategy. And then also just, we've kind of discussed some of it, but having my own family and the impact that some of our decisions can have if we do a good job, I think really impacts an employer and employees and families in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I want to put a pin on that because I think there's a chance for us to expound upon the why a little bit with you. But in the interest of getting Cliff a chance to say hello as well, I love the dynamic between two as well. So I've kind of got to do a little bit more of like orchestrating here. But Cliff, why don't you tell us who you are and some of your background, and then we'll pick it back up here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First, thanks for having us on.
Of course, man.
Your podcast is one I religiously listen to. I like it quite a bit, and a lot of your guests are very interesting, and I like what you're doing.
Present company included.
Yes,
of course. Well, yeah,
absolutely.
This is obviously the best podcast
so far. Biggest viewership.
We're on it as the best podcast.
Yeah.
No. So, Cliff Favors. I grew up in Indiana, Midwest. Joined the military, like Winston. 9/11 was my senior year of high school. So, again, a pretty big impact on me and my trajectory as an adult. Did that for 14 years. Got out in 2018. Met my wife. Had my children during that time. Moved all around the country. Saw a lot. Did a lot. It was a good time. Just like Winston, it was a blast. It was probably what I needed to be doing at that age. It was fantastic. Got out, moved down to Houston. First time I've ever really been to Texas or lived in Texas. It's phenomenal. I love it. We fell in love. Within 6 months, we're like, oh, this is home.
Yeah, and I feel Houston, though, is one of those cities that feel like it's a take it or leave it. Like some people are just love obsessed Houston. Some people are like, I would never live in Houston. It's too hot or whatever the excuse is. So what is it about the city that both of you guys sort of gravitated to?
So my wife's Korean and Puerto Rican. We love food. The diversity here of thought and experiences. I mean, it's as good or better as New York City or any major metro that you can think of. The food here is great. The experiences my kids get are phenomenal. I don't think you can see that anywhere else. And I mean, I grew up in a small town in Indiana. Like I can speak to that. It is it's leagues different than what I grew up with. So it's just, and then it's also very friendly to veterans, just Texas in general.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you guys hear this a lot, but of course, thank you guys for your service as well to this country. I always appreciate getting to talk to veterans. Want to ask you though about, Houston as well, because that wasn't home for you too, right?
Yeah, I'm a homer. So I mean, but to your point, I mean, I think Cliff kind of hit the nail on the head, but to me, it's the people. I mean, no one's going to Houston because they're like, man, I just love the look of freeways in the morning. Like it's
humidity and
traffic really gets me stimulated.
But no, I mean, to me, the people make all the difference. And I think Houston's one of those places that is very entrepreneurial in nature. People work really hard. People recognize working hard. It's funny because you have these little rifts with, with Houston and Dallas and things like that. But I grew up an Astros fan. I grew up in Houston. I love it there. Don't get me wrong. Come July and August, I'm trying to get to Colorado or somewhere else.
At this time of the year, going, what are we still doing here? It's 107 degrees or whatever it's going to be today.
We came back from Colorado, and it's just like, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah. Well, we do it because we love it. And like you said, economy is strong here in Texas. I think it is the people for me. I've been here most of my life, exception of college in Missouri. And, people in Missouri are great people as well. But there's just something about Texas. There's a vibe, there's a friendliness. People are open, they're helpful, they're cordial. That is a different feel than you get everywhere else. I want to come back to, if we don't mind, Winston, kind of your why. Because oftentimes I'll ask the question, how'd you get into benefits? And there's all sorts of answers across the spectrum, right? But some people intentionally get into it. Some people have a legacy of family that gets into it. People like me accidentally fell into it and found a home here. But you have a story, I think, that sort of not necessarily was the only reason why, but did compel you to have interest in healthcare. So if you don't mind, if you'd share that.
The immediate reason is exactly what you said. I worked at KPMG and I was doing strategy consulting and I was traveling 4 days a week and, also had a family, and so I was gone a lot. So really, whenever I first started in this industry, it was like, wow, I can consult and work with clients, but I don't have to travel all the time. And when I do travel, it's kind of when I would, I can control that. But no, I think the bigger reason is so when we had our daughter, my daughter's 8 now, we found out at the 20-week sonogram, and they kind of do the picture, they check their heart, they check their brain, all that kind of stuff when you're the baby's in utero. But anyways, we found out our daughter had a congenital heart defect and it was, pretty intense. And so we actually lived in Italy in the Army. We had just gotten there. We thought we were gonna be living in Europe for 4 years with the military. And the military did one of the nicest things that they do. And they're not always, gonna make exceptions for everybody, that kind of thing. But they did what's called a compassionate reassignment, moved us back to Houston so my daughter could be born at Texas Children's.
That's great.
And when she was born, she had, 5 days later, she had open heart surgery. It went well, but she was in the CVICU. And you're watching all these kids, who are in the CVICU going through this, process. And you're just thinking, nothing matters in the world when your kid is, sick or in trouble. But then the other part that, didn't hit me, I think, until later, which we were talking about, once I started realizing what we do for a living now, is there were other families that I didn't see at the hospital all the time. And so I was like, thinking as a parent, how are you not standing next to your daughter, your son in the CVICU, not realizing they were at work because they needed to pay for the benefits that their child was getting. So they were going through this extremely taxing, situation from their kid is in a hospital bed, hopefully going to be okay, but maybe not. And yet they also were having to balance financially having to pay for it. And so, I'm not going to say that that's why I dove headfirst into benefits, but that's something that
it would be hard to avoid that as an area of interest though, right? I think two things are at play there. One, we forget sometimes to praise how dynamic modern medicine is, the ability to do open heart surgery on a 5-day-old successfully. Is mind-boggling to me, right? So the scientific side behind that is incredible. The other side of that is people do forget the impact financially to human beings. I love the fact that Lockton calls it people solutions. We always talk about this employer, right? We're trying to help the employer. That's a faceless entity that doesn't have any connection to humanity. We forget sometimes that there's human beings that are impacted directly by the choices and the strategy that you guys put into motion as consultants. And I love the fact that we can talk about the human element and that it did stimulate you to a degree to join. Cliff, I don't know about you, but what was your lean in moment, or how did you discover the healthcare industry? Was there anything that triggered that?
Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for 3 main reasons. Number 1, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number 2, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number 3, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring him on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
Yeah, so much like you and Winston both, I kind of fell into it. In the military, I didn't even know this existed. We have a centralized health care, a TRICARE that we use, and it's one thing you don't think about. It's not the best, we won't get into that, I think. But when I got out, my first job in 2018 was with Johnson & Johnson here in Houston. So Methodist was, one of my biggest accounts, MD Anderson, all the big facilities. So my experience with healthcare was very much on the care side.
Okay.
So I observed that. I was in the ORs. I was, around listening to physicians and patients. So I kind of was able to absorb what the system looks like and feels like, and just I happened to have, when I was in the military, my executive officer when I was a commander, his godfather essentially was an acquisition by a broker firm out of Houston, and he was looking for talent that had one, leadership experience, which I had a lot of from the military, and then business development sort of experience as well. And he said, hey, I actually do know a guy down there. So we got in contact over a period of about 6 to 8 months, kind of recruited me, introduced me to the industry, and I thought, wow, like I've seen sort of the care side. If I can help, in any way, shape or form this industry, because we've talked about there are issues. They're not unsolvable, but they're problematic. So if I'm in a position to help employers, which we just talked about, and then the patients of it, live better lives and be, not discouraged to seek care because of a cost, then it made sense.
What did you recognize at that point early on that's the type of impact you could have? Did you recognize that the barrier to entry for most people was the out-of-pocket expense side? Did you have an introduction to that? Did somebody share that with you? I'm curious how you noticed that.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. So yes, at Johnson & Johnson, I don't interact with patients. That wasn't my job, but I would see it. So to Winston's point, I would see husbands, dads, mothers come in their work clothes just because they've got, hey, I've got 20 or 30 minutes. My brother's in here. My wife's in here. I'm going to drop some food off. I'm going to spend some time with them, hopefully catch the ear of the doctor for a couple of minutes. And then I've got to go back to work.
Yeah.
And you see it. And it's not an uncommon occurrence, which is disappointing, that they have to intentionally carve out time so that they can go spend some meaningful time with somebody that they care about who's receiving treatment. So that was where I saw like, hey, this is expensive. And also I'm now paying for my health care insurance for myself. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, wow, this is really expensive.
Hold on a second.
I'm paying a premium. And then when I want to see the doctor, I have to pay more money. So yes, it was looking at that. And then, going through Rice, so I got my MBA at Rice as well as Winston. So I kind of started to look through a business lens and say, hey, there's probably a better way to do this. And if the function of that is through, a broker consultant firm, style business approach, then that's probably the next
you can pick your lane, right? Like we were talking about earlier, none of us are going to solve it. The healthcare problem at large. You got to pick your lane of what interests you and where you think you can make the most impact. I was curious, I want to hear both of y'all's perspective before we sort of move on from this topic. Transition from the military, civilian life, like whether advice or your experience, I'd love to kind of hear what it was like to leave that world behind and enter this world. I know you're still in the reserves, right? But like what you would say to folks that are considering that, if there's anybody in the military that's listening, or, what you kind of learned through that transition that you would want to share.
Yeah. You might I'll just go first, I guess. But I mean, I think that one of the bigger things, it's kind of freaky to people, I think that it's taking that step out. There's plenty of people who are like, okay, I want to get out of the military. But then when all of a sudden now you're out trying to figure out, we had a little bit of I don't want to say easier, but a different path where like, it sounds like you had a job pretty much lined up pretty soon after. I went right out of the military, right into business school. So I had kind of an avenue that I was going to figure out my corporate life or whatever. But it's kind of scary. One thing that I found that was super helpful to me, and what I would tell other veterans as well, is you're not going through it by yourself, and to reach out to whatever city you're going to. So, again, we're big proponents of Houston, and the Houston veteran community, I think, is probably the best in the nation. Of course, not biased at all, but but I reviewed a bunch of resumes. I still review a bunch of resumes. I still have conversations with guys and gals that are getting out who are like, hey, what do you want to do? And then we connect them with people who are in that industry. So rather than saying, hey, I think I want to go into finance or in, whatever it may be, we're basically saying, hey, talk to someone who's done that for a while and get an idea of what it's like, because I went to a couple of things where they're like, what's the difference between an investment banker and an investment manager, which is basically like a wealth manager. And they asked a room of veterans whenever we were in business school. And I think one person raised their hand out of 20 something.
Yeah.
And but like, why would we know the difference, right? Just like we would say the, difference for different military jobs, and people wouldn't know that. So I guess long story short is to say, like, you're not going through it by yourself, and to reach out to others who've kind of been there ahead of you, and maybe see like, hey, maybe I need to touch up my resume. Maybe I need to understand how my military experience, because a lot of people come out like, well, I was a leader. And it's like, that's great. But you led people who were legally obligated to do what you had to, you told them to do. So how do you lead when people aren't, legally obligated to do what you have to say? So,
yeah. What about you, Cliff? Any perspective you want to add to that?
I would just piggyback. The biggest and most useful tool a veteran has in getting out is that network of veterans who have already walked that path. So reach out. If there's an industry you think you want to go into, reach out to people in that industry. We're all willing to help, which is what I found.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't know anybody if they had a unit in common or a friend in common. Just reach out. 99% of the time, they're over the moon to help you, solve a life problem.
Well, I don't know if it's universal, but I would say this industry, I've noticed, is very, very willing to help. Like, it is literally just an ask away for most of the time. And even people that are very seasoned and very high up in leadership and positions, if you just ask a question, most of the time you will get an answer. You will get real good advice as well. Yeah. And I don't know if that is unique to the benefits industry, if that's maybe just Americans in general. I don't know. But this industry seems to be very, very helpful, especially.
Well, so you kind of touched on it. So military, we talked about it earlier. I believe if you're in the military, you have a predisposition to service. Mm-hmm. And this industry is not unlike that. It's one, a big problem that needs solved. Two, it's a problem of service to people. How do we take care of families? How do we keep businesses in business? How do we do that? So it's very aligned with that service mentality, I believe. And I think that probably is part of your point right there, is everybody in it is generally in it for the right reasons, which means they're willing to help.
Yeah. We occasionally we critique practices within the industry. Very careful not to critique people too much or suggest anybody's doing the wrong thing. There are things that I think are suboptimal, if I want to say it that way, that behaviorally happen within this industry. And incentives, we're going to talk about incentives. People respond to incentives, right? And if the incentives aren't properly aligned with everybody involved, then of course they're still going to gravitate to that incentive for themselves. But like, I would actually ask you guys now as we transition into, let's talk some Lockton, let's talk consulting. Mm-hmm. But real quick, what is it, about Lockton that attracted you both? And maybe even we talk about how you guys ended up hooking up and becoming friends and working together and all that stuff. We haven't really covered that as well. Yeah. But let's bring Lockton into the fold then too.
So we were both at a different firm before this, but for Lockton, I looked at it as, I think one of your previous folks just said, hey, everyone who's top 20, top 30 broker is either private equity backed or publicly held. And that's actually not true, because Lockton is the 9th largest broker in the world, or in the country, one of the two. Mm-hmm. But either way, we are what we call perpetually private, meaning we are privately held, and it is, Lockton is owned by the Lockton family and the partners like ourselves at Lockton. Okay. And so there's not shareholders, there's not extra pressure from a private equity firm or anything like that on how we help our clients, the resources that we get, the team members that we get. I will say one of the things that has been kind of mind-blowing to me just about a year and a half into my time at Lockton is not just the resources, but the quality of the people that we have that we work with on a daily basis is incredible. Mm-hmm. And just something that I knew of, and I had heard from other people, but once I started seeing, we have a chief medical officer we have 3 or 4 medical doctors who are on our staff who work here in Dallas, and we work with on a daily basis, people who do medical coding and things like that. So that way, when we're going through and we're saying, hey, these claims seem a little bit off. Yeah. We have a full medical staff that will basically do like a grand rounds type of, dive into a situation and raise a red flag that, some claims are happening that shouldn't be happening. And they do that, they are locked in, they work for Lockton.
Well, how do you think I like the nomenclature you use, perpetually private. How do you think that alters behavior or changes behavior in a direction that you think is actually more beneficial, right? Or like, because it's the suggestion of making that distinction means I think it's driving different actions as a result of that. So what do you guys think about that? Either one of y'all. And don't feel like I'm not interviewing one of y'all. Y'all can chime in whenever.
All good.
I usually will let Winston talk first because it's just easier on the back end to clean up.
He's been talking more than I
have. I think it changes the incentives for us. So we're not beholden to an analyst prediction where we've got to hit quarterly projections. We're not, beholden to a PE firm's, EBITDA requirements or IRR requirements or whatever it is that they're asking you as an enterprise to do. We're only beholden to the clients. If we're not doing a good job for our clients, then they will change.
Yes.
They will find another partner.
As they should.
But our focus is 100% on the client. We're not distracted by periphery guidance from shareholders or other outside entities. We make our decisions with the client's interest in mind.
And you guys said that like constant aggregation or acquisition isn't part of the strategy as well, right? And I've seen both sides of that spectrum, right? There's the push for organic growth, there's the push through growth through acquisition. Sometimes the growth through acquisition doesn't go as smoothly as it's maybe suggested it will, because it's quite frankly, it's hard to take an entity that's been independent forever, slap a new label on it, and then turn them into something bigger, right? It doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, right? And some entities that aggregate are better than others, right? But how do you think, because Lockton has had a different MO, again, that shapes the conversation you had, the story that you get to tell? I'm sure you're bringing that into the table in prospect meetings and stuff.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, to your point exactly, that's what I used to do whenever I was a strategy consultant at KPMG was, you would look at these acquisitions and then you would say, they'd be like, well, financially, in like a financial model, this is great. And we have all these synergies and stuff, but they didn't take into consideration the culture and the incentives that were on each different, one group might be paternalistic, one group might not be as much. And so when you put these two organizations, once I feel like reality sets in, a financial model can be blown up pretty quick if you just put a little common sense to it.
That's like the GPS that calculates your route and takes you in this really weird, and you're like, wait, if I just go straight right here, I know that's better. And ends up, it'll recalculate and it's actually,
and it turns out you're
like,
right.
what are you doing?
Like, Google, get it together.
God,
what are you guys doing out there?
But so I think the other thing to emphasize though is I talk to folks in, very large agencies, lots of vendors, lots of big carriers. At the end of the day, it's the people, the human beings that you're operating with is more important perhaps than the logo on the business card. And so I want to talk to you guys about your personal strategies. And I do want to talk, when you guys say the phrase people solutions, again, I think that's a really cool phrase, but I want to understand that better. So maybe we start there, and then I would like to hear from both of you guys kind of your independent strategies, what you guys do well independently, and then maybe how you guys kind of coexist and broker too. But let's start with people solutions. What's that mean?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it's just what we kind of talked about a little bit before this is being able to be a broker and go out and, hey, I'm going to save you 10% on your insurance is table stakes and also just a very transactional conversation. What we're aiming to be is trusted advisors to a business owner or a CFO or an HR director, whomever it may be, to say, hey, here, we're having these issues, not just on the healthcare side, but maybe we're having issues, just on the retention side, or maybe, from a compensation standpoint, or maybe, we've got succession issues where we've got the next generation of leadership coming up into our company. And we've never actually done any leadership training or anything like that. So we're having these conversations that, again, is not just a function of HR, but a function of the overall growth and, I guess, future of a business. And so we want to place ourselves at the table and want to be invited to the table to have those conversations with business owners and with CFOs, because we feel like we can bring a little bit of a different aspect. We talked about this beforehand. We've only been in the healthcare space, but between the two of us, about 5 or 6 years, but we have a lot of experience in terms of building teams and leading teams. And so we're able to hopefully hone in on that and be an advisor and help them with that. So hopefully that kind of answers your question from more holistic standpoint. I like the change, because it suggests there's a lot more that can fall under that umbrella, but then by labeling it people solutions, of course, it's the human being, right? The human element that gets interspersed within that as well. I'm not just a broker. I'm not just a consultant. There's a lot of things that we bring to the table. Now, kind of piggybacking on that, Cliff,
some of those solutions I think that are brought to the table might be from solution partners, like vendor partners as well.
Right.
Not everything perhaps is in-house. Like, what are some of the conversations you guys have outside of benefits that you're talking to business owners about?
PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it is how are we providing value beyond, going to market?
Yeah.
So people solutions, just to touch on that real quick, it shouldn't be a math problem. It should be a people problem. How does that translate beyond, benefits? So if we're talking to a portco for a PE firm, they're looking at the different drivers for them. What does a PE firm want of them? They want EBITDA, they want more margin, they want all that. So we come in and we say, hey, look, you've got to have the right talent in place. You can't afford to lose key people. Mm-hmm. You want to grow, obviously, as a business. So how do we take care of you so that you're meeting your obligations to, let's call it this PE firm or the market? It could just be the market. How do we do that? So if we reduce turnover, for instance, over a 3-year period of time, the PE group is happy because now that trickles down to enterprise value. So when they transact in however many years, whatever that is, they're now transacting at a higher enterprise value, and that company now is more stable. So you reduce turnover problem, then you can start stepping into succession issues, then you can look at leadership programs, and all of that really is going to be tied together by a total rewards or a benefits plan that makes sense for the company where they're at and where they want to be.
Well, I think we'll reconvene on the subject later, but I do want to make the point now, and I ask you, do you guys feel the role of the benefits consultant is continuing to evolve and more is coming your direction, like you guys are being tasked with more? Okay.
Yeah.
Especially as we move into the big picture stuff, I think that's important to talk about, right? Because I've always been sensitive to the fact that you have a lot that you're expected to understand and know as experts. And every single day, there's more that seems to be lumped on the consultant's plate because they're not really sure where else to send it, right? So I'm sensitive to the fact that you guys are continually being asked to do more and more and more and figure it out.
That's where that team comes in, like you were saying. I mean,
that's
where I'm okay, and I know Cliff is the same way. I'm okay to say I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I might, say it in a more tactful way. But there's just things, like you said, there's so much out there. And that's where having a team, having a stop loss expert, having a pharmacy expert, we're also one of the only groups, Lockton, we don't have our own, we don't have our own pharmacy coalition because we feel like if we had our own, then we'd be incentivized to push it. Yeah. Right. And so we don't have our own. We advise on which one to go with, and we're not against consultant-led consortiums or what's the word I'm looking
coalitions.
for?
We're not against coalitions. We're against broker coalitions.
We're against broker
Fair
coalitions.
Enough,
Sorry.
Well, that's okay, right? And I think there's two things there, right? There's the incentives, which I really want to pick up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, though, is I think knowing when to delegate. And I think that's that kind of the piggyback to my statement earlier is I think in the past, consultants also internalize that obligation and we're scared to not know and we're scared to outsource responsibilities to a solution provider instead. Yeah. It is so complex nowadays. You have to have somebody you can go to today and ask a really complicated PBM question because there's no way you're going to be able to know that with 10,000 other things that you're supposed to.
Well, if you try and do it and you don't know what you're talking about, you've just totally ruined your credibility.
You've created a problem for yourself, for your company, for the client.
100%.
And look at any of the big consultant firms. They're teams. There are teams that go out and do a project for a client. It's not an individual because, like you said, that's a task too big for a person. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. And if that's what you're selling is my expertise, then you're going to fall short eventually, and it's not. Well,
even like people from the outside look at me as a stop loss expert. I kind of position myself that way, but also I guess I could understand why I get that label. I still ask questions on a daily basis of other people on my team. I don't know the answer to absolutely everything, and that's in the one narrow thing that I'm expected to know, right? So again, that's why I'm always cautious. I never want to criticize consultant industry at large. It's more just the behaviors. And so let's go into the behaviors, the incentives, right? We were talking about over coffee some of the misaligned incentives, especially around compensation. And I know we all have an opinion about that. But like you guys also had the advantage of starting 5 or 6 years ago and not starting 25 years ago, right? So it's easier to come in with a clean slate. But give me y'all's perspective on the way, kind of the proper alignment of compensation and structure and things like that. Yeah.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I always want to make sure that I'm on the same side of the table as my client. And so if we talked about earlier on are fully insured, if they get a 10 or 15% increase, essentially I'm getting a 10 to 15% bonus that year off of my inability to help them to control. And obviously some things are out of your control,
of course
but at no point should my client be watching, basically them and not just the faceless employer, but a cost that's being passed on to the families of that employer, and I'm getting paid more because of that. I think that you've done a good job of bringing that up with some of the past guests, and that just like ethically, morally, where Cliff and I come from in terms of how we treat people and how we want to be treated, that just wouldn't sit right. So I mean, usually whenever clients say, well, how do you get paid, I kind of turn it around a little bit and say, well, what makes you comfortable? What do you think is a fair value for how we do this? And we'll do either a flat fee, or sometimes what I've liked to do in the past too is, let's say we put a max fee on there, so it's not to go above certain amount, but if we do get commissions from whether it be stop loss or whatever it may be, it goes to the client to then be able to use for, let's say they need a call center, or let's say they need something else out there.
Yeah, there are certain products. I don't get big into ancillary and voluntary products, but there are some products where like commission is just in it. There's no way to deconstruct that. So I get that.
But does that commission then, you can decide, does it go to me? Now I'm driving around a Maserati and you're like, wow, that was really, nice for you. Or are we able to sink it back into your business?
Exactly.
And then you don't have to go ask for more budget, because that's the problem a lot of times is the HR folks are given, 1 to 2 people for a giant company, have a not a huge portion of the budget, and are asked to take care of all the employees and do a million different things. And so we want to help them create more value with whatever budget they have. So if we can find creative ways to repurpose some of those funds to be able to bring in a mental health program or something like that's top of mind for them, we're all ears on how to try and do that creatively.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion too. Oh yeah, did you finish your thought if you had
no,
something
that's
to
it.
Yeah. What, Cliff, about,
No,
I like this guy. Yeah.
I'm like struggling with words for once.
Thought complete.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this was something that was frankly a little disappointing coming into the industry is how the finances work within it. And we talked about this. One of my big things is I do not like fully insured plans as a general rule. And we've talked about
with you there. I mean,
Well, on
average,
podcast is called self-funded.
It's not fully insured. I've made that joke before.
We said it, on average over time, you will save money and provide more value to your employees if you're self-funded. So why doesn't that make sense for most employers? I get it. There's going to be outliers and exceptions. I get that. But generally speaking, it makes a lot of sense for them. So that's, to answer your earlier question about market, that's the market segment I approach and I feel is a better fit for my personality, my internal drivers, sort of my skill set is to work on that transition from fully insured to self-funded. But again, what it serves to do is ideally align those incentives too.
Well, and I want to add on to that, because I think we talked about there's a way that you might even put some fees at risk, right? And you don't have to do exact amounts or anything, but structurally or directionally, what do you mean when a fee might be at risk for performance or performance guarantees? What does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, so and this is my practice, what I'll do is I'll put 50% fee at risk.
Okay.
So what we'll do with a client is we'll identify KPIs to hold against for that
Cliff,
fee at
what
risk.
does KPI stand for?
Yeah.
Key performance indicators.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
you're just throwing out all these acronyms, and it's very military of you. And everyone's like, excuse me? What did
we
you
agree.
say?
Thank you, Winston.
Yeah.
We agree on what those KPIs are and what the time frame for is, and then we review them.
Yeah.
And it's very black and white. If we have not met the goals for those, then we do a tiered fee, not payback because we can't rebate, but we'll then slide that money into an account that the employer can then use for whatever they want to use.
And so, but I think I want to make sure I clarify. The employer and you are sitting down together and saying, this is what we're agreeing to be.
I'm not in a vacuum saying, hey, I'm comfortable not getting paid if I don't do this. It's them saying, hey, this is what we expect. I agree that they're realistic. And we sit down and we say, okay, yes, that is what we will be held accountable to.
How do y'all feel about the flip side? I'll come to you, Winston. How do you feel about the flip side of that, where some brokers will do a performance guarantee where there's additional monies to be earned, whether through savings or better than expected performance. So like, how do you view that structure? Or is it more difficult to quantify?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm going to give you a very consultant answer.
Please.
It depends.
Yeah. It depends.
And I think that everyone has their own, but as long as you're sitting across and you're both being from each other and you're being transparent about how you get paid, where it comes from, and then what you perceive the value to be, I would also flip the expectation to the client as well and say, hey, here are your expectations of me as your consultant, as your broker, but at the same time, here are my expectations of you, and not like, obviously I'm not telling Mike, hey, this is, I expect you, or I'm just going to cut you. But if we're going into a partnership, and we talked earlier, sometimes we'll be like, well, our benefits vendor, and I never like being called a vendor because it's just very transactional. We're partners in this, and we're partnering with you, but a partnership means mutual and equal trust. And so if we need to be sitting across from each other at the table and saying, this is what we're going to be doing together. And that's what I think that, to your point on the people strategy, and you were kind of talking about our specific kind of ways that we approach business. What I've seen, and I think what Cliff has seen as well, whether it be in business school, whether it be in consulting, is a lot of companies like to talk about their 3 to 5 year business strategy or financial strategy or whatever, but a lot of them aren't talking about their people strategy. How are you going to hire people? How are you going to retain people? How are you going to grow the next wave of leadership to help you achieve whatever your business and financial goals are?
You plan to move into a market. How are you going to support that growth?
How are you going to find that? People are like, well, we're going to hire the best people. Great.
Awesome.
How are you going to do that? And so it's like that second and third level question that I think is our job to ask, that again is maybe totally outside of healthcare. But it's saying, where do you want the business to be?
Even if it's just you have somebody that can help, like how valuable do you do a business if you go, oh, you're seeking to do that? I actually know a person.
Guy.
I know a person that can help. I'll make an introduction. Right. You become more valuable to them as well. But those incentives, like I want on a probably last question here, but those incentives, the structure, I think the inverse of that, unfortunately, is like you said, where we get an increase to our revenue and that employer is paying more money. Like, and when you start to really understand and unpack it, we've talked about commissions and the stop loss and how that might actually make the employer pay even more money than you think. Like, I don't think people even think about that enough to go, well, wait a second. You were designing this strategy, but my costs are going up. You're making more money. I don't even think they make that connection most of the time until you point it out. And that's one of those just broad-based behaviors that I think just casting a light on. I'm not trying to demonize and say you were wrong and everybody that ever did this was bad. But if we all can agree that's a very hard way to argue for if I explained it to you properly.
Well, we talked about this earlier. When it comes to just the general healthcare, when people think of the cost of healthcare, most people don't have good things to say about it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
And you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And so I think there are folks, unfortunately, that can be, and again, not to demonize, but it's part of the industry, that are part of the problem, and they're kind of, when we talk about trimming the fat on some of these plans, they're kind of part of the reason that the fat is there. And so that's where hopefully Cliff and I can come in. I think a big part of what we do is educate, because to your point, people don't either A, know about, or B, want to talk about what their commissions are and stop loss, and they'd rather just kind of, hey, whatever makes sense to you guys, but they're putting that trust in you. So I feel like it's also our obligation trying to educate them on here's how this works, and y'all did a good job of here's how a dollar flows through and why that matters to you. I think that that's a huge part of what we do, because that's, to me, one, how you gain trust, but two, how you elevate the conversation. And we talked earlier, I try and lead whenever we're meeting with CFOs or business school buddies and things like that. People are like, oh, benefits and this squishy thing, and we're all just, having wellness fairs all the time and stuff like that. And it's important, but there's a lot more to it. But no, I'm talking about your second or third largest line item on your budget, on your P&L. If we're talking about 7-figure numbers and 6-figure savings or more, is that worth a conversation? And I think that's part of where that education piece comes in, because people are just like, oh, benefits is this fluffy thing. No, it's a huge deal. It's a huge spend.
Well, the way I look at it is, again, shine light on it, educate people. It's going to resonate with probably a lot of people once they connect. Some people it won't, and that's also okay, right? Then we just don't do business together. We don't work together. I'm perfectly fine with that. But speaking of do business together and work together, you guys told me over coffee, we'll sometimes co-consult, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I'd love to hear like how, when you guys partner together on a case, kind of the things that each one of you bring to the table, but why you think maybe together you guys make such an impact for an employer. So I'll go to you, Cliff, first, and then come to you, Winston. Like,
Cliff, what do you bring to the table?
So
what are you
Please
good
share.
at?
What would you say you do
a
here?
piece of philosophy. I'm a big fan of, like a rising tide will raise all ships.
Yes.
That's bottom line. Neither of us, Winston or myself, are in this for ourselves. Yes, it feeds our families, but again, it fulfills that sense of service that we both have.
Yeah.
It's engaging and hard. It's a hard puzzle, so it's fun. It's unique and it's interesting. So I think just from a personality standpoint, Winston and I, we just mesh very well. I'm probably, I would say, more regimented than Winston. I mean, I'm up at 4:30 every day. I'm working out. I have a routine that I like.
How do you know I'm not up at 4?
Well, but also, so Winston was giving you a hard time over coffee, right? You're more regimented, but Winston was here earlier, even though you stayed last night.
Yeah, he stayed at a hotel like 5 minutes away. I
and
flew
he
in
drove
from
in
Houston,
this morning, and he beat you to coffee.
still beat you.
Sometimes it works in his favor to not have a plan,
or a better plan.
So my plan didn't work.
But
out.
so are you kind of a more of an executor operator, if you will? Like a plan is there, and then you go follow through on it?
I resonate very well with COOs and CFOs just because I can dissect and pull apart what does this look like, how does this impact, and lay out a 3 to 5 year time scale of, hey, these are what all these decisions are likely to do to the business, to do to the people, and I can do that fairly well and have that sort of longitudinal conversation. Winston, and I'll let him speak to it, is he's just better at engaging on a personality level. He's like this podcast, for instance. I listened to it. I wouldn't have thought to approach you and come onto it and Winston say, hey, we should do this. I think it'd be a good idea.
Well, yeah, let me go say that out loud. People always ask, well, how do I get on your podcast? Sometimes you just ask.
Yeah.
And I go,
I think I
that
sent you a
sounds cool.
LinkedIn message or something.
Send me a LinkedIn message.
And it was
if
like within a day.
If it's compelling enough, I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah.
But so first off, do you agree with everything he said? Like as his own self-assessment?
Yeah, no, most of the things.
Of it's true.
Most of it's fairly true.
Yeah.
Most of all.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. We'll put like disclaimers at the bottom of this.
Technically, yeah.
No,
So,
I mean,
but I'd like to kind of like, so then obviously you guys mesh well together.
Yeah.
But when you mesh well together, that means the complementary skill
Right,
set.
yeah.
It's not a redundant skill set.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah. On paper, if you look at us, one, like, essentially, I have hair and I'm, much more, enjoyable to be around.
Here, but he's got it here.
Yeah, but he's got a great beard.
I can literally just like, we can like Photoshop, like
grow your beard out.
Put his beard on my hair. There you go. No, but I think that coming, on paper, we're both military veterans. We're both Rice MBAs, but we excel at different things. And I think if you kind of are joining each other, whether it be, co-founders of a business or for us, we each have our own business. And then sometimes what we call JV or joint venture business together, if it makes sense for our skill sets. But then also, as much as we like to give each other crap all the time, like we both come from the military where a team is better than an individual. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the same time, I want someone who I know has my back, and I know Cliff has my back. And when we have conversations all the time where he might have a lead on a potential prospect, or he's the one who got the meeting, which is the hardest part in our business. And then say, hey, Winston, I want you to come with me. And then Cliff is much nicer than I am. And he'll be like, hey, let's do this 50-50 or something like that. I'm like, no, hey, you did the work. Yeah. I'm just, going in there, I'll be your note taker, or something like that. So I think that,
but it really comes down to trust, right? Like that's what it really is. And like the mutual trust, but you guys are going to pull each other in on a deal because together you guys can deliver because you have developed a rapport and trust over time, and then what the other person brings to the table. So like I recently did we shot a power self-funding with a guy named Pete Doran here at Pareto, and Pete, I know any question I ever turn to, even impromptu in the moment while we're shooting something about self-funding, he knows the answer, right? There's an element of trust that person, that partner that you're standing there with will be able to facilitate or fill in the gaps of things that I might not know.
So that's a perfect example. So Winston, and this is a weakness of mine, a fault, is I'm sometimes a little too literal, and I'll look at things and I don't draw out sort of the drivers behind it. So Winston, in a conversation, if we're in a meeting, we'll come away from, I'll say, hey, so this is what it looks like, the issues. No, didn't you hear him say, X, Y, and Z? Like, that's their thought process behind it. I'm like, oh, I didn't. I did not hear that.
Okay.
And we listened to the same conversation, but he's pulling parts of it that I just didn't even hear.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, so let's talk about kind of the employers, like clients, right? Like, not necessarily a specific niche or a specific industry, but like, what are the types of maybe employer partners that you are drawn to because you do well with them? So I'll start with you, Winston. Like, what do you look for? Who do you like to work with?
I think, there's a lot to unpack for what the HR function does. And even for this CFO, who a lot of times is overlooking that kind of line item and responsible for the budgeting side, and sometimes also for the business side of it. So I'm looking for folks who are trying to improve, but are just trying to figure out, hey, how can we do this the right way? And looking for like a thought partner to do it. So again, it's not necessarily size wise. I probably have about 50-50 in terms of fully insured and self-funded clients in my experience thus far. And obviously the push is usually to get to a self-funding, position where you feel comfortable, but it's also a risk appetite, right? We can have the conversation and they're just not ready yet to do that. And that's okay as long as it's part of the path. So to answer your question, I think that the biggest part is, I'm looking for someone who generally does care about and want to do better for their employees, but they need to do it in a economically sustainable way, because they can't just give away the farm and then, they still need to have a business that's, going to be around in 5 or 10 years. Yeah. So, but I think that where Cliff and I come from and the people that we like to partner with are folks that, like I said, aren't looking for a vendor. They're looking for a partner who's going to come in and help them to kind of dissect the puzzle that, that Cliff talked about earlier. That's really tough. You know what I mean? Like, and there's coming out of COVID, it wasn't just like healthcare stuff. It was like mental health and coming back to the office and do we, vaccination, no vaccination, all these different, political things that are up in the air and people are having to tackle a lot. So coming in, I think for people to say, we can't do this on our own, or we would like some assistance of folks who maybe take a little bit broader lens, and to come in and give advice and to have a conversation. And then of course it comes down to some of the healthcare stuff and being a broker partner and a consultant. But that's a long-winded answer, but I think that's what we're looking for, is people who want to be partners.
Like it's a persona, right? Yeah. Clifford, do you want to?
So that's exactly right. A growth mindset. If you're a C-suite who has a growth mindset, who wants to look at opportunities to provide value, to grow in different ways, to look at the puzzle differently. That's who I want to work with. I want to work with somebody who's going to have that conversation, who's going to really be thoughtful about what they're asking and what they're doing. And that could be, 100 life employee, 50, 1,000, that doesn't matter. It's all about that mindset and that culture of that company. Do they want to, ruffle the feathers a little bit if they need to, which in my opinion, most of them do.
Yeah, most of them. I would agree that most of them need to. But how don't we, actually, before I go to that, I think that's why Pareto resonated with me, is that there's an opportunity now, and we focus on that small to mid-market segment. Yeah. So 50 up to maybe 750 to 1,000 sweet spot. Like, those employers now have access to solutions that used to be reserved for the 10,000 life group.
Yep.
Right.
Not only cost containment programs, but stop loss contracts and the captive vehicle itself makes it possible, but it makes it repeatable. It makes it now scalable for us. And so I like the fact that there's something that you can offer that group that you trust, that is built, that has the right structure. They get to join those 800,000 million belly buttons that are on the plans, and they get to benefit just like a 10,000 life group. So to me, that's the opportunity. That size segment, there's so much opportunity for consultants like you guys, for us. To mine, it's nearly an infinite market for us to go after. But you get to work with somebody that's still in a phase where the things that you do will be noticeable on their bottom line, right? It'll truly impact the future.
When those 10,000 life groups have a whole benefits team, at least like a benefits director, benefits team, all that. If you're with a business owner who, or CFO or something like that, where they're, call it 500, 600 lives, a lot of times you got maybe one, an HR director and then one or two people on it who are responsible for running this massive, line item with all these different kind of levers to be able to pull on. And if you're self-funded, to be able to have someone who's a partner to help you out, whether it be kind of someone on our side as a consultant, or like for your standpoint of being able to go in there and show value. I think that then if they grow, or even if they stay the same size, like, you are an integral part of their team. And back to the point we were talking about earlier, when they're thinking about business decisions, now they're like, well, who do I trust? Who's helped me as I've built this business? And you're part of that discussion. And to me, there's no bigger like kind of honor, I guess, and to be able to be part of those discussions with them.
Well, I was going to say there, I think I told you guys this over coffee. I got to go to Las Vegas for a couple of broker events, and twice we got asked the same question. Afterwards, wrapping up, chatting with people as a post, kind of debrief. Like, why aren't more people doing this? It's like, what's the downside? How come every employer doesn't do that? And I love when you get to that point where people are they're in their head, the wheels are turning, like, what am I missing? This sounds too good to be true. And you can give them some caveats and, hey, not everything is hunky-dory and rosy, but that's the conclusion we hope most people come to when they hear these stories is, why is everybody not doing this?
Yeah.
My answer is typically because the majority of employers and even the majority of consultants aren't comfortable with this subject matter. Well, they're not proficient enough, right?
You look at the time scale, and you just said it, it's only relatively recent that it's been even available to some of these smaller, mid-market groups. So there's so much value to unlock in that market segment that they, like Winston said, they will appreciate, because it's material impact to their business, to the thing that they have created. And and that's what takes care of their families. That's what takes care of, you provide jobs for, let's call it 1,000 people. That's, 1,000 families. Like, that's impactful. And if you can provide real tangible value to that, it's...
Well, you don't need a bigger why than that, right?
Exactly. That just, one, personally is so self-fulfilling, and it's real to a lot of people. It's a real impact.
Well, and before we zoom out to the big picture of healthcare, because I would love your perspective, guys, especially military, TRICARE. Like, I would love to hear you weigh in on kind of the big picture of healthcare, what role private and public sector might play in your opinion. But I think the subject I wanted to come back to is the evolution of what falls on your plate nowadays.
Yeah.
So give me something like 2 or 3 things that you are being commonly asked all the time now that used to a few years ago fall outside the purview of a benefits consultant. Like, what are you talking about right now?
Yeah, I think that post-COVID, a lot of it, and this is not going to be a surprise, but it was on the mental health side.
Yeah, you mentioned that a couple of times. I want to hear, give me some more specifics on the mental health.
I think that, it's twofold. And again, this is less on the healthcare side, or mental health is, but the different resources. I think we have a huge mental health shortage of people who are out there, whether it be like counselors and things like that to help. So then there's all these telehealth kind of options that come out, but not all of them are created the same. I want to say I saw something that there was something like 200 or 300 mental health kind of apps and stuff like that that have come out in the last like 3 or 4 years, basically since COVID started. But again, not all of them are created the same. So how do you filter through the noise and what actually is meaningful that's out there? I think that's part of it. I think the succession discussion is a big one. I think there's a lot of the kind of size that we're talking about segment. If you own in Houston, if you own a 500 person pipe distributor and your kids don't want to go into the pipe distributing business, you're looking for, who's going to lead my company. I'm responsible for the 500 families that Cliff alluded to. Who am I going to hand this company over to? And I don't want to turn it over to private equity or whomever, like good, bad, or ugly. That's just, the opinion that they have. So who's going to take over my business? And I think that that's been something that's been top of mind that we've had those conversations about. And again, these are all conversations that are outside of healthcare, but it's back to the people solution side of how do I grow the next generation of leaders at my company? And those are conversations
that's even happening inside of our benefits industry right now. There's a knowledge gap, a talent gap, whatever you call it, where there is a kind of the generation that was running these shops that we've kind of talked about that is looking for succession, whether that's sell or whether that's pass the baton. But there's a perceived, I don't know if it's entirely true, of a gap generationally of people ready to take over these organizations. How do you feel about that? Do you agree that that's the case, or do you think that's overstated, that there's a lack of ability?
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
So I can, from an industry standpoint, I can only speak to my experience at my previous employer and now at Lockton. And I think you do, to a certain degree, see, this sort of barbell. On one end, you've got folks that are ready to sunset. They're ready to go enjoy time off and do what they want to do, outside of work. And then you've got a very narrow band of people that are about our age, that are either relatively new to industry or have been in it for a while, maybe in just different roles. And that's sort of, the cue to take over this end. And then you've got another, barbell on the other end of younger entrants that are just brand new. So I think anecdotally from what I've seen, that is fairly accurate. I mean, as I look around the last two companies we've been at, there were many more sunsetters and very young folks.
I don't think of us, we're not like particularly young, but
I like to think I'm very young.
You can, but the gray hairs in your beard say
every
otherwise.
once in a while I feel young within.
I had this conversation the other, segue, like, when do you start to feel old? We were at a Texans training camp event, and I was like, man, I feel like I could still get out on that field and do that,
It's just like,
I was kind of like, hey, I got $100 if you go out on the field and go do that, and I can videotape you getting trucked by a Texans player.
Completely not true. I would hurt myself.
Well, you wouldn't hurt yourself. Someone else would hurt you too.
Well,
not to segue too much, but I feel the same. Like, it's not that I could go out and run around the field. Like, I feel like the touch, soccer, you'd be able to trap a ball, pass a ball, still there. I would be so slow by comparison. Those guys would be lightning compared to me running around the field. But I think it's true. I like the way you described that barbell. I've never heard that analogy before. I think that's fantastic. I do look like we're in that segment that is the liaison. We are that narrow band between. I feel like I can relate and would love to help pass the baton of this knowledge to the brand new entrants to the market. But I talk a lot and deal with a lot of the executive level folks in the industry. And I do feel like there's only a few of us. So I don't know if people by attrition leave our industry because they get burnt out or something, or seek to do something else. But why do you feel like there's not a lot of people ready to take over these businesses?
Well, I think that, I don't know. I think you're saying in terms of the insurance space?
Industry. Let's talk insurance.
No, I mean, I think that we kind of joke around in our office. We have some of the talent acquisition people are around there, and we just say like hashtag insurance is boring. Because people just think like it's insurance. Like who's, growing up and they're 8, and you're like, I want to be Superman. I want to be a police officer. Like I want to be an insurance broker. And it's like no one's thinking that. And so not saying that like obviously it's you're the same as police officer.
We have a little bit of a PR problem in our industry, I think.
But I think that's part of it, right? And so I came from what, coming out of business school, being a strategy consultant at a Big 4 firm is like is a really great spot to be. But I was traveling around all the time. Like I was paid pretty well, but not anything, crazy for out of business school. But I've found it to be both financially and so like I've got 4 kids under 8. I'm able to coach football and coach soccer, and I'm home every night for dinner for the, obviously if there's some travel here and there, but it's a great lifestyle and it's a great way to have an impact. And so anyways, I think that story, to your point of the PR problem, and that's why we do our like insurance is boring, just kind of as a joke, is like, it's actually a great industry that is really a kind of a gem that people don't think about.
I would like it not to be one of the best kept secrets, right? I don't think anybody ever sat me down when I was in college and was like, have you considered this as a career track? Nobody said that.
Cliff is this until my previous employer reached out to me. I didn't even know this was a job.
Yeah. Well, that maybe we need to go figure out how we get on college campuses and go talk about how amazing insurance is.
So that, as I understand it, again, I didn't grow up in it. That used to be a thing. So when I have a couple of mentors in the industry, I think everybody should. They talk about that. They talk about this problem that we're talking about now, and they say, hey, it didn't used to be like this. It used to be, firms, agencies, carriers were on campuses heavily invested in creating, a really solid talent pipeline. And that has kind of gone away.
And that's probably a different conversation for a different day, but I'd love to understand the why behind that. But why don't we go into kind of land the plane, if you will, although you guys just jump out of planes, and I think both have bad knees because of that. But let's land the plane virtually through the podcast. Big picture of healthcare. And I'd love your perspective, having been inside the military with TRICARE as well. But both your perspective, there's no wrong answers. Broadly solving this, like if we were going to know where's the industry going, what do you think some of the dynamics are going to be? What role does single payer play, if any? I know we'll have opinions on that, but I'd love to just hear you guys kind of wax poetic about that question.
Yeah, I mean, like good or bad answer, but I generally, and I think I enjoy my time in the Army, and I'm still in the reserve, so none of the opinions I say represent the myself or the DOD. I have to put that out there. But no, I mean, I honestly think that most of the time, this is maybe the Texan in me, but the more that the government gets involved, the messier things get. And so I don't think that that's the answer. That being said, though, free market that is healthcare can't go unchecked. And we've seen, whether it be air ambulances or hospital bills, I think that a lot of the things that different administrations have done in the past, a lot of it, again, it's coming out of a good place of we want to try and help and make this, bring some solutions. And I think that the Surprise Billing Act that came out from the previous administration was good. And there are things that are being done where everyone's saying there's a massive problem with the cost of healthcare. And I think that the part where we hope to be part of the solution is that most people get their healthcare through their employers. And we are the ones who advise the employer. So I would imagine that we can have some kind of impact on the cost of healthcare and trimming the fat. I think a big part of it, though, is the fact that we just need to figure out, I guess, the financial piece of it, and the folks that can't afford healthcare that essentially the insurance firms or people with insurance then do pay for. I think some of that's a little bit overblown, but I think that it's basically a problem. I'm not going to pretend to have the solution now, but I do think that it's not a government solution, just to be kind of frank about it. But I do think that there's the government and private industry has to get together and do something that kind of figures it out. And I don't mean private industry like the carriers, where then it all just happens in favor.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I don't know if it's ever really truly a completely free market, right? There's always going to be, public policy. There's always going to be lobbying. There's always going to be efforts to sway opinion or sway. And then I think, like you said, it does get a little bit messier when government intervenes, because there's always unintended consequences or unforeseen, things that happen as a result of what seemed like on the surface a good policy decision.
Like the small thing called the ACA a few years back.
Yeah, things like that, right? So like medical loss ratio, same. Let's make sure that they only pay a certain percentage, or they get a certain percentage of profit. Well, what do they want to have happen on the other side? Just expenses go up, so I can make more profit, or I'll funnel pharmacy money over here and not be subject to medical loss ratio restrictions. Things like that, right? Like you can always play the game as a result of the new regulations and figure out how to continue to win. So I don't want to overstep you. What would you like to say about that question?
So first, to address the government,
I'm glad we're just tackling small things.
You government, listen. I don't know that the government at scale has ever done anything great. Given choice to the government to solve our problems, they're just going to tell us what to do, and that just has never worked out well. That's just not what they're designed to do. The government is not designed to do that. So you're asking it to do something that it's incapable of doing. Fundamentally, it's incapable of doing it because it's not designed to do it. So I don't think that'll ever be a solution.
Well, then how do we inch ourselves to the private sector towards the solution?
So I think one step at a time. We talked about this earlier. If you look at it holistically, it is an insurmountable problem, and it's almost depressing when you look at it from that perspective and that scale. So it's one step at a time. It's what can we do? How can we change our own ecosystems and landscapes? I think technology is going to play a huge role in creating transparency, which is hopefully going to change the way things are priced. I'm sure they'll probably do what you just talked about, which is inflate, create spread somewhere that you can't see, and do that. I'm sure that'll happen. But I think with increased transparency, the market will have to adjust to it. So I think technology is going to play a big issue.
I think that knowledge is power is kind of a common cliche, but it truly is, man. Yeah. I think the role that I can play is more people are aware that this is out there. Yes. You guys are shining a light on incentive practice. You're shining a light on mental health solutions. The more people that are aware that these things exist, the better decisions that can be made as a result of that. And I think having conversations about it is where it starts, right? Yeah. You guys get to influence at an employer level. I get to influence kind of at a broad, just discussion-based level. But collectively, we get to work together to solve problems for one employer at a time. And I think that's the fun thing that we get to do.
Yeah, and like you said, and not the faceless employer, is the family behind each employee. And we talk about in our business we talk high cost claims and things like that. Like, we had a high cost claim hit. That's a huge personal event for somebody if they're a high cost claim, right? They either were diagnosed with some life changing thing, but like that's where I think that to humanize this more, and I think that goes back to what we're saying is to humanize it, to educate. And I think that you hit the nail on the head is like the transparency is key. Like whether it be on your, for your broker or consultant where, hey, we're transparent. We're going to sit down across the table and say, this is what we get paid, et cetera, to make sure that, again, we're part of the solution, not the problem. But then on the just healthcare as a whole, I think the last administration did a good job of trying to make things more transparent. So that way, now obviously people still try and hide stuff and things like that, but I think that's moving in the right direction.
Cool. Well, why don't we say closing thoughts, gentlemen? I want to leave the floor for each one of you just to sort of, whether it's a call to action or, wanting to speak to a particular persona. What would you say to wrap up the conversation? What you'd want to leave the audience with? Oh, Cliff, you got to go first this time. Winston's looking to you.
I started off.
I would just say, one, thanks for having us on. I think you're doing a great thing. I do want to meet some of the previous guests.
Happy to make introductions.
So I'd love to talk to some of those folks. But just to any employer out there, to anybody that's in a position to influence what you're doing, take an intentional look at how you're doing this thing that takes care of your people. Without the people, you don't have a business. It's not a math problem, it's a people problem. Let's solve for that, and then your business will grow. As a function of solving that problem, it'll grow, you'll do better, the families will do better, everybody will be better off. It'll be a net positive for everybody. And if that's the mindset you have, a growth mindset, love to talk to you.
Yeah. Well said. Try to top that.
Yeah. Too easy.
Too easy.
Bar.
Yeah.
Please, he starts flexing.
Yeah. All right, let's go. I'd say kind of final thoughts is we hit on a lot of the bigger points, but there are families behind every one of the decisions we make. And in my case, it was my family. Obviously, I was on TRICARE at the time, so it's a whole nother discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for us to basically understand that and put ourselves in the shoes of that parent in a ICU setting or something like that, or spouse or whatever, really starts to. And I think that when you also explain that to clients, and that's where you're coming from, people don't see you because they kind of look at us, and I'm not sure for where you're coming from when you are in, is like the sales guy kind of thing, which is totally fair. And obviously that's what we do to feed our families. But at the same time, we also are humans who have gone through these life events. And so I guess that the biggest thing that I would say is to be transparent and sit across from a business owner, or a CFO, or an HR director, and try and understand where they're coming from and try and help be a partner and not a vendor. And also that's to the employers as well. Look for a partner and not a vendor. Have a higher bar for the conversations you're having. But I would say the biggest part is that we're all trying to help each other out, and it's very kind of altruistic. And I'm not just trying to do like unicorns and rainbows here to finish things off, but we want to help each other out. We want to help companies out. We want to help families out to navigate the system when times are tough. Insurance doesn't come into play when things are good. It's usually when things are not so great. And so if we can make that
set up that framework
a little bit, so that way people are better taken care of, then I think we did our part. So.
Awesome, man. Well, I love it. I'm going to speak just from my own seat right here. I thought this was a great podcast, fellas, and I genuinely mean that. Like the dynamic you have between each other. Clearly, you guys are friends, but you're also mission aligned. That's palpable to me, just as the host of the podcast. So I really, really enjoyed this episode. Thanks for reaching out and asking, how do you get on? And again, the answer is just ask. But you guys you've been great. We'll go hopefully grab some lunch after this. But it's very nice to meet you, fellas. Can't wait for this episode to come out. Good stuff.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah.